I'm Michael Surkan, the group manager for both the Linked Seattle and Software Engineering Productivity groups on LinkedIn, and I am pleased to offer this presentation and advice on how to use podcasting as a tool for building professional relationships to our group members for free. And I'm thrilled that you're listening to this, and I hope that you'll be able to participate in the podcasting programs that we've set up for both of the groups to help group members do podcasting themselves and to help them in their careers. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I had a bit of an unexpected journey myself. Back in 2009, I was let go from Microsoft after 9 years working there in product and program management. And I realized that my professional network had shriveled. I knew a whole lot of people at Microsoft, but I didn't know a lot of other people outside the company anymore. And no one was returning my calls. It was really hard to get interviews, in fact, downright impossible. When I submitted my resumes and job applications, I wasn't getting any calls. It was just like going to a black hole. And out of desperation, I turned to podcasting. And podcasting was something I'd done as a hobby for several years, which was basically several friends and I getting together once a week and recording a conversation where we ranted about the economy and putting it up on a website. And I was just looking for anything I could do to give myself an edge and to help get a job, basically. And to my amazement, podcasting worked. And I was just astonished at how many people would talk with me, how much I learned, and I did get a job through podcasting, and I've now helped several other people do this, and it's been working for them as well. So I'm really tickled to be able to share this with Linked Seattle and SEP members. And as we talk, the thing to keep in mind is really how much is it worth it to you to meet the people you want to know? Because that's what we're talking about. This is really about relationships. Podcasting is just a tool. What we're really doing is building the relationships with people at companies you want to work with, or at companies you would like to be able to sell products to or do business with. That's what we're talking about. It's, in my experience anyway, being successful in careers or in business is largely about who you know. What you know does matter. At the end of the day, you do have to be able to perform, but if you don't have those connections and if you don't have those friendships at companies you want to work for or do business with, it's really hard to get off the ground and even get people to notice you or talk with you. Resumes and job applications don't get you a job. They don't you don't even get through the door to talk with people if that's all you've got. If you're in business, cold calling prospects or offering gifts won't get you new customers. You need to have those relationships with people. And every career coach and sales expert I've ever heard talk about how relationships are key to success. Network is what you always hear from everyone. And so relationships are what we're trying to do, what we're trying to get to build. And podcasting is one of the tools that I use, the primary tool. And I'll go so far as to say, in my experience, podcasting is the most effective means I've ever heard of or ever discovered for meeting people and building those deep relationships that are those important, deep professional relationships. I go so far as to say that the only audience that matters is the person you're going to interview. So there's something radically different with the podcasting that I do. You may think you know what podcasting is, but what we're talking about today is something very different from the traditional podcast. My wife likes listening to the Adam Carolla show, and that's a great podcast where he has millions of listeners every day. But he is producing content to build an audience. He is he's a showman. He's producing creative content that's interesting for driving audiences, and that's not what we're going to be talking about. A podcast to build a relationship is 100% successful if no one ever listens to it. The primary reason that we're doing podcasting is to be able to meet someone. And the person we're meeting is the person we're interviewing. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. We're not learning how to become a media star. We're not learning how to create compelling content that attracts listeners. If your goal is to learn how to be the next big talk show host, then this isn't, you should be taking some other classes somewhere else. I'd love to learn how to do that, frankly, because it's not something I'm very good at. So podcasting is very simple. It's just a recorded conversation that you throw up on, you record it, you put it on the internet or on a website somewhere. It's talk radio for the internet. For the purposes of what we're talking about, podcasting is a conversation with two people talking. Podcasts could, of course, be just a single person giving a lecture or reading an essay, but that doesn't help you build relationships. What we want is the intimacy of being able to talk with somebody and getting to know them. And that's why we do podcasting, or that's why I do podcasting. Podcasts can be embedded anywhere. It's easy. They're easy for people to listen to. You can put little play buttons on almost any website, so it's easy for people to access it. And the reason podcasting is so wonderful as a networking tool is because everyone wants to be famous. People are flattered to be interviewed for podcasts, and the response rates are tremendous. This is why I believe in podcasting so much, because it works. People are willing to talk with you. You can spend weeks and weeks, months trying to get people at the companies you want to work at to go out for informational interviews with you, to talk over coffee about job opportunities. And you can be trying to convince potential customers to go to lunch or dinner with you. And you can and fail for again and again and again. Whereas when you invite somebody to be a guest on your podcast show and let you interview them, you're going to get a much better response rate. In my experiences, the response rates are well over 50%, and in some cases, 80 or 90% response rates of the people you invite. What's better, the people who you're inviting, who you ask to talk with you, are people you know you want to contact. I should caveat that these great response rates depend somewhat on who you're trying to invite. If you're trying to talk with Fortune 500 CEOs or senior executives, it's going to be a lot harder to get people to talk with you, and your response rates are going to be a lot lower. But for the vast majority of people, you don't need to know the CEOs or senior executives at companies. You don't need to know A-list celebrities or experts in your fields. That's not critical for you to get a job. Just knowing someone who works in a division at a company that you want to work for, a software engineer who works at Amazon, that's helpful. They know about jobs that are in their area, and if you can get someone, just a senior software engineer, to go and hand your resume to someone at their company, that's worth gold. To be able to get that. I was speaking to a group of accountants in Seattle a month ago, and there was a young lady there who just graduated with a specialty in cost accounting, and I mentioned to her, if you start the Belltown Cost Accounting podcast show, you could very well get 80% or better response rates inviting all the cost accountants in the Seattle area to be guests on your show. Because nobody's beating down the door of cost accountants asking them to be on shows. So they would love to be interviewed by people out there. And I know this works. I've helped several other people who've never had shows before get started, and they get good response rates as well. You don't have to have a big audience to get people to agree to talk with you. And as I said before, it's not even... For the purposes of why we're doing this, it isn't really necessary to have an audience at all, people listening to your show. Although that will happen, and we'll talk about it, why you'll almost certainly get an audience anyway. I'm not teaching people how to do video. For the purposes of building relationships, Audio is the best way, is the best tool that you can do, that you can use. It's simpler to record, it's simpler to edit, and it's absolutely painless for your guests. 90% of, over 90% of all my podcast interviews are done over the phone. Is all my guest has to have is a telephone, and I just record the conversation. Whereas if I'm doing video, I have to make sure that my guest has a webcam, that they have we have compatible software for recording it. There can be glitches during the conversation or during the video feeds. The editing takes more time on video. It takes more training to learn how to do video right. And if I'm going to take a video camera to my guest's office, I have to set it up. They have to have a place, let me set up somewhere for a little while before we have our interview. So it's more of a pain for my guest. And whereas with audio, as I said, we just often do them over the phone. So the logistics are simple. We can do it at any time convenient for both of us. So audio is what I'm sticking with, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And this is flipping internet marketing on its head. This is micro marketing. We're targeting individuals that you want to know. We're not going out doing mass spams. You're only going to be inviting people to speak with you that you know. You know these individuals are people that you would give your eye teeth to have a relationship with. And I firmly believe that for success in your career and in your business, 10 friends, 10 good professional relationships are better than having 100,000 anonymous clicks coming to your website. And as I've said earlier, having an audience is almost beside the point. It can be nice, but it's not necessary. And in fact, focusing on an audience can be a distraction from the goal that we have here of building relationships with people. The more you obsess about trying to create super compelling content and getting good distribution for your audience, the less you're going to be focused on being a good interviewer and on just interviewing as many people as you can and building these relationships. Because that's what we're doing in games. We're building relationships. And podcasting is just an incredible tool that opens doors. It's just unbelievable how willing people are to be interviewed for podcasts, where they won't agree to sit down over coffee for an informational conversation. They will say yes to be interviewed. And it creates feelings of goodwill. People who you interview for podcasts want to help you. They feel you're doing them a favor. They feel that people feel that being interviewed for a podcast is something of value, that having this recorded conversation is being created is something that they really appreciate. Now, all that said, when you do interview somebody for a podcast and you give them this recording of the conversation that you post on your website, this is, or we're going to be posting it on the Link Seattle and Software Engineering Productivity Group websites. Don't do it with an expectation that they will do something for you. Not everybody you interview will, but many will. And so you want to do this. You're giving this gift freely, no strings attached. And more often than not, you do reap rewards. Most of the people you interview will become friends who will want to help you. They will give you referrals. They will give you advice. So you do benefit from this, and guests will promote you. Everyone you interview is so thrilled to have this conversation on the internet that highlights them, that they will be posting it on their website, they'll be tweeting it, they'll put it on their Facebook page, and all of this points back to you. Anyone who listens to this conversation is listening to you. They hear you there. And so this is helping you get better known. And that's where you're going to be getting an audience, by the way. And I tell people that if you want a bigger audience, the most effective thing you can do in podcasting is to interview more people, because the people you interview are going to do far more to promote your show than anything you can do. And you're going to learn from these conversations. The people you talk with are going to be telling them about what the needs are in their businesses, what challenges they're facing, what they like, what they're in their business or not. And this is going to make you a better job candidate or a better salesperson. You're going to know better how to sell to these people. You're going to know better how to interview, how to apply for a job. And you're going to become an expert and an authority. Not just through learning, but because you have all of these interviews, you're building a portfolio. You can show this to future employers. People will see this and say, wow, Sally is really quite connected and is really quite an expert in this field. Look at all of these people that she's talked with. I believe so firmly that podcasting can help with building careers and businesses that I flat out say every job seeker and sales or marketing professional needs to have their own podcast show. Now, some people will say that podcasting is just too time consuming, that they are already really busy with networking events and other things that they've got going on, so they just don't have the time to do this. And it's true. To follow the program and the techniques that I'm teaching you, it takes effort. There is effort in here. You're going to have to take time to talk with people. You're going to have to learn some skills. But I firmly believe this is more effective than anything else you can be doing to build relationships. And in that light, this is going to save you time. You can cut out a lot of the networking activities that you do, or the traditional types of marketing activities. I was talking with a sales executive a few weeks ago, and he was telling me how he's so busy going to networking events and mixers to try to find prospective customers that he just doesn't have time to do any podcasting. And I got talking with him about how effective these mixers and networking events were, and it turns out that most of them aren't. And it's completely random who he's going to meet, and very infrequently does he even meet people at these events who are truly qualified customers that he absolutely wants to meet. And and even when he does meet somebody like that, that doesn't always lead to him being able to take that chance encounter into a deeper conversation and building a relationship with that he needs. And as we got talking about it, I was telling him, well, if you start podcasting, every time you interview somebody, you are guaranteed to be interviewing somebody who you know you want to meet and who is qualified. You wouldn't have even invited them to talk with you if that wasn't the case. So it's time really well spent. Yes, it's time, but it's well spent because you're talking exactly with the people that you want to meet. And I suggested to the sales executive he could cut out a lot of stop going to many of his other networking activities, and he'd find that he was being more successful because he did 2-3 podcast interviews a week, and he wasn't going to some of these other networking activities that he was frequenting. He'd find he'd have more time and still be more successful. And the other thing about podcasting is you could do it right from your office or your home. I do a lot of my podcasts late at night after my kids are in bed, which is an amazing thing too. So many people are so thrilled to be interviewed for podcasts that they're very accommodating to my wacky schedule and will talk with me at 9 p.m. at night, even if they're in New York. I have people waiting to do podcasts with me who are on the East Coast, and I'm in the Seattle area. And so it's midnight their time, and yet they're still hanging on there waiting to talk with me for the interview. So I'm not suggesting you do your podcast at 9 o'clock at night, but I'm just pointing out that you could do them when it's convenient for you as well. So there's 3 steps to building a relationship through podcasting. You're going to identify and contact the people you want to meet. A great way to do this is to use LinkedIn, and all of you who are listening to this are members of LinkedIn. You're either a member of Linked Seattle or Software Engineering Productivity Group, so you know about this. So on LinkedIn, you go and you join groups that are in the field that you want to work in, or that you want to sell your products to. And you can do member searches. When you're in a group, there's a members tab, and you can go do keyword searches. You can look for company. You can look for job titles and any combination of things to find people who are members of those groups. And when it pulls up the list of people, you can click on any of the names you like, and you can see their whole resume. You're looking at the person's entire profile. You can, in one glance, you can tell if this is somebody you want to know, because you'll see what company they work for, what their background is, that they're a director or whatever their role is. You're going to know really easily. You can't get better qualification data than what you're looking at in their LinkedIn profile. In half an hour, anyone can come up with a list of 20 people who they know they would give their eye teeth to have a relationship with. And it's simply by joining LinkedIn groups and doing searches for people. And the great thing about LinkedIn groups is that you can email anybody who's a member of the same group that you're a member of, even if you don't have their email address. You don't have to have a premium LinkedIn account for this. As long as they're a member of the same group that you're in, when you're looking at their profile, you can click send a message in the top right window, and you can send them a direct email. And that's how you're going to contact these people and invite them to be guests on your podcast show or to let you interview them. And I should mention that I've posted a quick start guide to both the linkseattle.com website and the scpforum.net website that has a whole bunch of tips and even sample invitation text that you can use in your emails. So you can write somebody an invitation saying something to the effect of, I see that you're a member of the software engineering productivity group on LinkedIn, just like I am, and I was really impressed with some of the things in your profile, and I would love to interview you for one of the software engineering productivity productivity podcast show that I'm a guest host of. And you will be a guest host. All the community members are valued contributors or welcome to be valued contributors to the podcast show. So that you send out your invitation, and most people are going to agree. And it's not a big deal if 50% of them don't respond. If you find 20 people, you send out 20 messages. You just copy and paste your invitation. You change the names in it. And so it's very easy to send out a bunch of questions. This isn't mass spam, right? You're only going to be targeting maybe 10 people even. Send a message to 10 people. If you sent invitations to 10 people a week, you're going to get at least, I can't even imagine how you're not going to have 3 people agree to be interviewed by you. And so it's likely going to be more than that. But you will be getting responses then, and then you're just scheduling an interview with them. And that's when you're going to have a conversation. You're going to talk with this person and record a conversation. And recording the conversation, I have tips in the Quick Start Guide on the linkseattle.com site and the scpforum.net site. And I generally tell my guests that it takes about 45 minutes. The interview itself is 15 to 20 minutes in length. And I spend the first 10 minutes or so before the official interview discussing the agenda. Well, I'll ask my guest, how do I pronounce your name? What title should I use to introduce you? A couple sentences to introduce what you do and who you are. And then we work out 3 or 4 bullets of a theme or themes to talk about in the interview. I don't heavily script these. I just have some topics. You're implementing a new agile methodology in your software development. That's great. Let's talk about that. And so then when I introduce my guest and we get into, I will then say, hey, I hear you're implementing a new agile management methodology for your software projects. How's that going? Are you finding that it's more effective than what you did previously? And all of a sudden we're in a conversation. And the most important thing you can do is to just listen. The best interviewer is a good listener. If you can just keep your mouth shut and let your guest talk, that is going to lead to great interviews. And you just periodically ask a question about what they were talking about. And these aren't very long, so you don't have to worry about running out of things to say. These are relatively short conversations. And these interviews are all about your guest. It's not about you. You're not going to be asking, you're not trying to sell yourself in this interview and put your skills across or show how smart you are. You're just going to be asking them questions, honest questions about what they are doing, letting them talk about what they're up to. Because again, this is about building relationships, and the way you're going to build a relationship is by listening to somebody talk and making them feel really good that this is somebody is really interested in what I'm doing. One gentleman who I've been helping with podcast, he really loves trying to give advice in these interviews. And I keep telling him, don't do that. You're not trying to show how brilliant you are in this. This is where you're trying to let your guests talk and let them tell about their ideas and their experiences. And you will be able to build, even if you don't sell yourself in the interview, you're going to be able to talk with this person outside of the official interview. These relationships go on beyond the podcast itself, beyond the interview. So you will have plenty of opportunity to talk with people. When we're finished with the formal interviews, my guests always will ask me usually they'll ask me, "Oh, so what do you do, Michael? I'm curious." And, "Oh, you're looking for a job?" Or, I mean, I have a job now, but we do get talking. So don't overload this trying to really sell yourself during the conversation. And lastly, you're going to give the gift. You're going to thank your guest. You're going to send them a thank you note with a link to your podcast. Thank you so much for talking with me, Sam. And then you're going to write them a recommendation on LinkedIn. I do this for most of the people who I interview for podcasts. And I say, "Wow, Sam was so knowledgeable about medical equipment. I was thrilled to have him on the show." And another interesting thing about LinkedIn is that the only way you can accept a recommendation is to link with somebody. So every time I write somebody a recommendation, they have to connect with me. And it's all automatic, by the way, when that happens. So nobody wants to turn down a recommendation. So, and if I've interviewed somebody, I do write them a recommendation. I'm thrilled that they talked with me. And I think I've written close to 200 recommendations on LinkedIn now for people. So that's another great tool about LinkedIn that I think is heavily underused, is the recommendations. If you follow these steps that I've outlined and follow this podcasting program, you will have a new best friend. And that's the name of the game. It's building relationships with people in the companies you want to work for or do business with. I firmly believe that 90% of getting a job is having the right contacts, and this will deliver that for you. I do offer help to people at my practicalpodcasting.com site, but we're a community. You're members of Link Seattle or SCPforum.net, and I'm going to provide help and support through those communities. We offer free hosting of podcasts at our community website. You're free to go and register on the site and post your podcasts there, which is actually a great way for you to benefit from working with other people too. So the audience is going to grow much faster for our sites where we have multiple people contributing, because there's going to be a lot more content there that will attract listeners than if you're doing it all on your own. So things will happen faster for building audiences. And that also makes it easier for you to get people to be interviewed by you, because, I shouldn't say makes it easier, because no one ever turns you down, or very few people will turn you down because of the audience, how many people you've got for an audience. The only people who might turn you down are A-list people or executive types or something. So, but I've had no problem interviewing people of entrepreneurs, of startups, and mid-level managers, and people who've written books. I've interviewed tons of people, and people who I've helped have done this as well. So, but it's still not a bad thing to have a bigger audience, and we're going to have that on Link Seattle and SCP Forum. And also, I encourage you to post questions on either the Link Seattle or Software Engineering Productivity group groups on LinkedIn. I will answer questions. I watch very closely to see any questions that come up around podcasting. I want to help people. And I also, and the other group members will help too. I do strongly suggest you go and get the Quick Start Guide, the podcast Quick Start Guide from linkseattle.com or scpforum.net. I list a lot of technical things about software you can use for recording your podcasts. I use Skype, for example, and there's a plugin that I use with Skype. It's a free plugin called MP3 Skype Recorder. It's easy to install, and it automatically starts creating MP3 files with all of your conversations. Every time you talk with somebody, it's creating an MP3 file. That's your podcast right there. Editing, it is useful to do some editing, but I do very limited editing. Audacity is the tool that I recommend people use, at least on Windows. It's the most commonly used audio editing tool in the world, But again, I only do very simple editing of this. I trim out some of the text, some of the conversation before and after the official interview, so there's no extraneous stuff there. I don't worry about modulating the sound to make it all perfect. We're shooting for AM radio quality here, AM talk radio, not FM stereophonics. As long as you can listen to it well, that's what we're going for. And there's lots of, and the great thing about either using Skype, an MP3 Skype recorder, or using Audacity is there's so much information out on the internet about them. If you go to YouTube and just search for either MP3 Skype recorder or search for Audacity, you'll find lots of videos of people showing how to use these tools. So there's lots of support you can get. And of course, I'm going to help you in the groups if you post questions there, and other group members are going to help too. So you can do this. And I've taught people how to do this. I taught, well, I know it sounds like a cliche, but I taught my mom how to do podcasting. She does marketing for a small boutique company in Vancouver, Canada that does in-home care for seniors. And she started her own podcast show. She's 62, and she started her own podcast show interviewing people in, I call it the elder care industrial complex of British Columbia. She's interviewing doctors who specialize in seniors. She's interviewing estate planners, estate planning lawyers who specialize working with elderly. And she asked them what their advice is for elderly people in their fields. And these people are giving her referrals. So, you know, this does work. And I was able to teach my mom, who is a non-technical person, and she's cranking out these podcasts all on her own now without my help. So anybody can do this. One other thing I've got to strongly recommend is get a USB headset. Don't use built-in microphones on your PC. Use a USB headset. They're cheap. You don't have to get a super expensive one. Just do it. Get a USB headset. That's what you're going to use for recording your conversations. It's okay to have a small little audio recording device if you want to do an in-person interview. Most of mine are done over the phone just for logistics reasons. But hey, I'm all for interviewing people in person. You're likely not going to do it in a coffee shop because of the ambient noise. But if you go to their office or something, great, go ahead and interview them that way. So thanks so much for listening to this presentation. And hey, if you like this video and you think that this idea of helping our groups people in our groups do podcasting is a great idea, and you feel this was a useful information, go into the group and make a comment on the threads about podcasting and tell people you liked it. I'd like to spread the word. I feel so strongly this can help people, and I'd love to get the word out so that other people can benefit from this too. Happy podcasting.